Evening, everyone. So yesterday we learned about how data binding works along with state in our React. I hope you practiced that. Yeah? So we discussed about data binding. I explained one-way binding, and another one is two-way binding. And temporarily in two-way binding, we discussed about how do we work with what are the options. So we discussed about how do we deal with event, right? One example I showed you already. So events you will learn later, detailedly about events you will see later. But you are going to understand a concept called events and functions in next levels. So, but before that we will use here and there some events. So which event we used, we discussed another point, state in which one? Function, state in function component. How to use state, why we need state, we discussed it. Why we need state? State is mutable, and you need a state in web applications because web applications are stateless. So HTTP is a stateless protocol. To maintain the data and make the data available across requests, you need to configure state. Earlier, we don't have state in function components, but from React 18 and higher versions, we have state. How to configure state? By using, we can configure state by using use state hook. Generally, we call it as use state hook. We will learn a lot of such hooks one by one in different occasions. We will see that. So by using use state hook, we can create a state. We can store data in the state. We can access and use it. Right? Now, we will see some other examples here. What we will do is, today we will see how we can manage data from API. So accessing data from API. We will see simple example here. First, we will learn some predefined APIs, and later we will learn how to create our own APIs. Because to create APIs by your own, you need some knowledge in server-side technology. Simply, you cannot ask how to create API in React, right? We don't create any APIs in React. That is all about server-side technologies. So we will first learn some built-in APIs. Ready-made APIs are present, we will try them. After that, we will create our own APIs and we will see how to handle them. Actually, what is the concept of API? So what is API concept actually? So API is application programming interface. It is application programming interface. API stands for application programming. What is the intention of API? So it refers to distributed computing architecture. It refers to distributed computing architecture. What is distributed computing architecture? Distributed computing architecture is nothing but distributed computing architecture allows two different applications running on two different machines to share information. Two different applications running on two different machines can share information. That is what actually the concept of distributed computing. Or it is not only that, actually, or two different applications running on two different process of same application of same machine. Some machine can share information. That is what actually distributed computing. Two different applications running on two different process of same machine can share information. This is called distributed computing. Let me explain these 2 points actually. So generally, distributed computing means actually, what is the concept of distributed computing means? Suppose, so we have a application. This is a application here. This is a client application, client app. So we are having a client application. So a client application is present. It is present on the client computer. On a client computer, a client application is present. Now there is a server application. There is a server application on server. There is a server application. This is a server application. So server side application, we call server application. Now what happens is, so we have certain data here. I'm just giving a very basic outline. Later I will explain detailed architecture, right? So here, generally we have database. Now what we want here is, this server application communicates with the database. It will get the database, data from the database, and it needs to send this data to client. Now what is the client is, who is this client? Client can be a PC or client can be a mobile, right? Client can be any device. It can be a PC. So client app can run on a PC or a laptop. So it can be using a tab or it can be using a mobile, any smart device. It can be even a smartwatch, right? That means the device can be anything. He may be using app from any device. Now, very important is how this data, whatever data is there, how this data can reach everybody. It is not just a PC, tab, or a laptop. It is also sometimes this is using Windows operating system. It is using Mac operating system. It is using Android operating system. It is using iOS. That means different devices, different operating systems, different services. Now the question is, how your data can reach everybody? If your data have to reach everybody, in which format it should be? Actually, for that, what happens is, we create the data. That means we convert the data into a format which is understandable to any device, any platform, any environment, which is XML or JSON. That means now the data is converted into an XML or JSON format, so that this data can reach anybody. Any device can consume the data and use the data, anyone. What is the concept of this is making your data available to any device, any environment. That is what actually the concept, that is what the actual purpose of API. What API will do, it provides the data in such a way so that the data is available to everyone. Remember, I am just giving outline because once we start backend integration later, I will explain the architecture right behind it. I'm just explaining the point that for a React developer, the data comes in the form of XML or JSON. So it is usually coming from an API. A React developer need not to know which backend technology they are using, need not to know which database they are using. We just need the API URL from where data is coming. Our responsibility is to consume the data and present the data, create interactions with the data. So React developer need not to know what is the backend technology. So you just need to know the URL that is sending you the data. You need to know the URL which can submit your data. That is only the point you should know. I will show you the points here. Actually, data can be in several forms. I already told you, I am not explaining any backend concept here. I am just giving a simple brief overview. Detail in the backend technologies integration, you will understand. So the concept of this session today is how we can consume data coming from various APIs. We are not discussing about creating APIs, right? We are learning about how to consume data coming from APIs. Let's see how we can consume data from various APIs. So data comes in which format? XML or JSON. Actually, these days, data formats, so many are there. Generally, distributed, this is distributed computing. There are so many distributed computing architectures. Actually, there are various distributed computing architectures. There are various distributed computing architectures. What are different distributed computing architectures? Like we have like Corba, we have like DCOM, we have like RMI. So we have like EJB. So we have like web services. We have like remoting. All these are different distributed computing architectures. We have Corba, DCOM, RMI, EJB. Different technologies use different. Different technologies use different. Corba is common object request broken architecture. It is used in almost 14 languages, including C, C++ and all. DCOM is distribute component object model. It is used in technologies like VB, Visual Basic. RMI is remote method invocation. It is used by Java. EJB is enterprise Java beans. It is used by J2EE. Web services is known to all technologies, Java, .NET, PHP, Python. Everybody uses web services. Remoting is related to .NET. .NET uses remoting. These are all distributed computing architectures. That means two applications running on two different machines can share information. Not only that, two applications running on same machine also can share information. For example, you see in your mobiles, you may be using some Amazon app. When you are using Amazon, you open Amazon, you search for some products. You close Amazon and you open YouTube. In YouTube, you will find advertisement for that. How YouTube knows what I have done in Amazon? That means actually the applications are sharing information between them, which actually you can control. In your app settings, there will be an option whether allow your app to share its data with other apps. If you block that, it will not allow. If you don't block, by default, it is allowed. That means an information in two different applications running on same machine can share information between them. That is distributed computing. For example, a bank sends an OTP. OTP comes to SMS app. This bank app can read that SMS and fill it. That means this SMS app is sending data to bank application. You are sharing information between apps. This is distributed. Two applications running in two different machines can share information. Two applications running on same machine can share information. That is what distributed computing. These are distributing computing technologies actually. So there are so many distributed computing architectures. So these are distributed computing architectures. I will show here. Distributed computing architectures. So you need to know this one actually. These are all distributed computing architectures. These are distributed computing technologies. We have Corba, we have DCOM, RMI, EJB, web service, remoting. And here, Corba is common object request broken architecture. It is invented by OMG group. It is used in more than 14 languages. So we have DCOM, distribute component object model. It is used in Visual Basic. We have RMI, remote method invocation. It is used in J2EE. So we have EJB, enterprise Java beans. We have a web service. It is used everywhere. Every technology knows web service. Remoting, it is used in .NET. These are distributed computing technologies. For example, if I asked you, name some mobile applications you are using in your mobile. If you talk about Amazon, Swiggy, Zomato, Skype, these are not mobile apps. They are all distributed apps. They are all not mobile applications. They are all distributed applications. Mobile application means what? Camera, calculator, calendar, phone book. All these comes under what? Mobile apps. Amazon, Swiggy, Zomato, Netflix, all these are not mobile apps. They are all distributed apps, app to app communication. That means web application, distributed application. Suppose you can watch Netflix in a browser. That is Netflix web application. You can watch Netflix in Netflix app. That is Netflix distributed application. So you have both web applications, we have distributed. And very important, how they communicate with each other. How they communicate with each other. Actually, service specifications are three types. Service specifications are three types. There are three types of specifications. We have SOAP, we have REST, and we have JSON. Three types of service specifications are there. We have SOAP, REST, and JSON. Currently, we are much using JSON. Lot of companies are still using REST, but we are more than REST now. We are using JSON. Actually, what is SOAP? Service-oriented architecture protocol. Here, the consumer will send an XML request, and the provider will send an XML response. That means the provider will send. This will send an XML request. Let me give in a new line so that you can understand. Consumer will make an XML request. Provider will send an XML response. That means the request and response will be in which form? XML. From client, an XML request will go. From server, XML response will come. We are not using this SOAP anymore much. Earlier, we have to use this SOAP, service-oriented architecture protocol. We are using REST, representational state transfer. In REST, what happens is consumer will send a simple query request. Send a simple query request. Simple query request. Question mark A is equal to 10 something. Query request. And provider will send an XML response. And optionally it can send JSON also. But in JSON, what happens is in JSON, consumer will send an XML request. JSON request. You can send an JSON request, and provider will send an JSON response. So request and response is in the form of JSON. Actually, in JSON, not only just JSON request, it can optionally send a simple query request also. It will respond with JSON. That means, what is the developer's responsibility? He should know how to communicate and how to get the response and how to use the response. So that means even after learning React, when you go for job interviews, once you are qualified in all the theoretical rounds, and they will test you practical. When they test practical, they will say that you go home, we will give you 2 days time, we will send you an email task, you finish that and submit to us. And in the task, they will give one screen design, they will give you screenshots, they will say that you have to design this with functionality, like filtering, sorting, searching, all such functionality. Now you will ask, where is the data? Then do I need to create data? They will say, no need. We will send a API URL. Their data is present. You can use that data. So they will provide you APIs. They will provide you the data and you can use it. Now the point is, for example, you are designing a website. In a website, you want to show current weather forecast. You want to show current weather forecast of particular city. How? We use weather API. What that weather API will do? You just send the query of which city. That city weather data it will send in the format of what? JSON. What is our responsibility? Collect that data and present the data in a proper way so that user can understand how much degrees Celsius it is, how much humidity is there. Every data value comes in the format of JSON. Our responsibility is to consume the data and present the data and create an interaction with the data. Let's see one example here now, right? Actually, these are all different types of service specifications. Actually, these are web service specifications. You don't need all this. A few I will give. These are specifications. We have SOAP, we have REST, and we have JSON. In SOAP, what happens is, in SOAP, the consumer will send an XML request. SOAP service request will be in XML form and provider will send an XML response. The request and response will be in the form of XML. In REST representational state transfer, the request will be a simple query and the response will be in the format of JSON. And in JSON, JavaScript object notation, request is in JSON and response is also JSON. That's how the request work. For example, I will show you now which we will implement in our concept. Suppose you are developing an application. You are developing an application for science and technology. That means your domain is science and technology. You are building some app which is related to science technology. Now you need a lot of data related to science technology. Now in that, suppose you want to show some space data about solar system, about Mars, about Earth, so much you want to show in that app. You are a developer, you are building an application related to science and technology, and you need a lot of data related to science. Now, who can provide such good data and the true data about space, science, and technology? You can take help of NASA. NASA provides free data to developers. You see, this is the official website of NASA. This is NASA API official website. This is NASA APIs. This is NASA APIs. So this is the NASA API portal. And the objective of this site is to make NASA data, including all its imaginary and all type of data accessible to developers, app developers. That means they can make use, because if you are trying to create an application related to space, science, technology, and you want data, Mars photos, Earth photos, you will Google and you will get some photos. They are majority fake, because who will have the real photos of Mars? Only the people who are on Mars. And NASA have its own rovers on Mars. They provide videos and photos, lot of knowledge about space, and they provide lot of free data to developers. They will tell the developers that you make use of this. So we will provide you the data and educate the world about the space, science, technology. Generally, data is provided here. Observe carefully. We will browse their APIs. When I browse APIs, these are all APIs. So many APIs they have. Astronomy, picture of day, asteroids, so Earth, so many. You have like some like Mars rover photos, NASA image and video library. Now I select this Mars rover photos, and you can see I scroll down. They give a simple query here. You can see query. And this is a simple query. I click on this query. It is going to return me the data in the format of JSON. This is the data. That is how data comes to us. You are watching Amazon website. In that, all products details are present. That is all JSON. What a front-end developer have done, he consumed that data and designed the data with a good presentation so that everybody can understand. Actually, now in this data, there is a photo. But how an ordinary person knows the photo? Then you see there is a photo here. I will copy that and I will paste in a separate window. You can see there is a photo. This is the photo. But general people who see this, they can't understand anything here. Now we need to create a good interface. We need to create a good interface. And that interface will allow the users to understand your data. And from there, they can interact with the data. Remember, not only presenting the data, interacting with the data. Here, NASA have provided hundreds of photos. Means hundreds of photos they provided. Now we will display all the photos. And we will create an interface like, I want photos recently taken past 1 week. I want photos taken by a rover called Curiosity. I want the photos taken by this particular date. Such options are not here. They provide only data. That everything you need to design. Filtering, sorting, searching, everything you need to design. You cannot edit this data, but you can provide an interface from where user can interact with this data easily. For example, you visit any Flipkart site, right? When you open Flipkart or Amazon site, here I select mobiles. All the mobiles related data comes. That means suppose some mobile related data comes, right? Yeah. So all the mobile related data comes. Lot of mobile related data comes. Actually, this is all JSON data, which is presented in a good format. It is presented in a good format. Now, what important is left side, they designed a panel. In this panel, they can filter the data. They can filter by brand, by features, by price. Is all this filtering provided in data? No, they provided just data. And this all filtering, sorting, searching, we have to design as a React developer in the front end. This is our role and responsibility as a React developer, right? You will get data, you need to present the data. You don't care which technology is sending you data. That means if anybody asks which technology NASA is using for data, we don't know. They will not tell, right? We don't know, they will not tell, we don't need at all because we just need data. That URL is required for us, right? That means you don't need to know which technology is used in the background because many times when we learn React like technologies, many times people ask, sir, how to integrate React with .NET? How to integrate React with Java? How to integrate React with PHP, Python? If they ask this question, that means first they don't know about APIs. They don't know about APIs. There is nothing like React is integrated with .NET or Java. There is nothing like React is integrated with any technology. React is used in the front end and your backend technology can be anything which will generate an API, will send an API. A React developer don't care about any technology in the backend. I don't care what technology you are using. For a React developer, so any technology in the backend doesn't matter because he don't need to deal with the technology. He need to deal with only the API that is provided by the technology. That means React developer need not to learn any integration with .NET, Java and all. There is nothing like that at all. Only the point is sometimes what people do in their .NET application, they put React in front end. For that, they do some configurations. Those we will learn. So we will discuss those points at the end, how they happen. But this is the responsibility now. What we will do today, we will try to present this NASA data in a good format. Right? We got the data and we know the data URL. This is data URL. Let's copy this URL. I will show you other APIs also. Various other APIs also I will show you. But once you copy this data, first responsibility is, that means you have to just copy this URL. First responsibility for a developer is to understand what type of data it is returning. As a developer, first your responsibility is to first understand what is coming. That means what this API URL is returning. Can you tell what type of data it is returning? JSON, it is returning an array or an object or a string or a number or a boolean. What it is returning? It is returning an object. That object have a property called photos that is of type array. That means it is returning final return of this URL is object. That means this is finally returning object. In that object, there is a property called photos, which is array. That means now can I map on this object? You cannot map on this object. You have to map on this property in that object because photos is array, not that object is. And very important, every photo is an object again. Every photo contains ID, sol, camera, and see camera is again object. That means embedded objects are there. It's very complex data. I already showed you some complex data how to present, right, in previous examples. Now, if you can present data like this, that's very good. You will see more complex data in real time, right? So many complicated things will be there. But now important, I don't want everything. That is challenging. I don't want everything. I want only few details. I want photo ID. I want the photo and I want which rover took the photo, which camera took the photo, camera name, rover name, and photo and its ID. Actually, every photo has lot of details. ID, sol. In camera, we have camera name and camera full name. We want full name. After that, it is having image source. It is having earth date. Rover is again object. Rover ID, rover name. I want rover name also. That means I want only few details in this data, not everything. Let's see how do we present this, how we can create that. Let's see that. Now we will learn some more important points also. Like, let's see first thing. Here, we will create a new component. We will create a new component. Let's go and add a new component. So in the components, I will add a folder. What is that? NASA API. That is NASA API is a folder. That is the component folder we created. For this, we will add files. One file is some NASA dot component dot NASA component dot JSX. That is JSX. I will create another file for NASA dot component dot what CSS. If you want some styles and effects, you want to keep into them. Already we learned that approach in the last. Okay, now in this NASA component, we will create export function, and this is NASA component, and this NASA component should return a simple markup. We will create a simple class container fluid. So container fluid, and here I will keep a heading. So Mars rover photos. Like this, I will display. Now below this, I want to present the data, but I don't want everything. What I want here, let's create a table. First, we will create a table. We will see different types of presentation, how to do that. In the table, I'm giving table and table hover. And here we are using T head. In the TR, in the TH, I will say photo ID. Okay. After that, preview. Preview is photo. After that, I want to print camera name. And after that, I want to print the rover name. Which camera took that photo, which rover took that photo. These details we want to present. Actually, every photo has a lot of other details also. Rover ID, camera ID, rover shot name, camera shot name, which date it is launched, which date it taken the photo. So many details are there, right? As of now, we are just using this. Okay. These need to be presented in the table body. In the table body, we have to present that. Now, the question here is how to consume the data. How do we consume the data? When we have to consume the data? Actually, first, whatever data comes, that data we have to store. Then where you will store? You will create a state. We will create a state to store the data. So let's create a state. How to create the state? Import. What to import? Use state from React. Okay. How to configure the state? In the function constant. What is it? This is, I will give as Mars is an object. And we will say set Mars is an setter. It will be what type? Use state. That is the data type we have defined. And what type of data it is coming with? It is coming with what kind of data? Object. Because you saw final data is returned object now. That means it is returning an object. This is very important. So first, I will not give any type. That means it is open for any type. That means it is open for any kind of type. If you mention any specific, then it is mandatory that only that type of data should go in. Right? That type of data should go in. If you say object, it should be object. You say array, it should be array. Right? Now, as of now, it is any type. Okay. Now the question is when to load. When to load the data. When to load the data. Usually, if you are designing a HTML page and you want to load the data when the page is ready. When the page is ready, then you write an event called body onload. Right? You will write body onload. For example, suppose I kept here a button. I kept here a button. I will say fetch. That is the button fetch. And I put a class BTN and BTN primary like this. We will put a fetch button. I will first put this in the startup. Let's go to index.js. In index.js, which component to start? We have to start with what? NASA component. We have to start with NASA component. Okay, let's run this and see. So we will run npm start. So by default, it is just having an empty screen here. Now we want the data to load. We want the data to load when user clicks the fetch button. When user clicks the fetch button, we want to get the data and load the data. So here we are going into this component. In this component, we are writing a function. We are writing a function, and the function name is handle fetch click. Am I right? That is fetch button click, handle fetch click. Now when this should fire up? It should fire up when user clicks this button. That means we have to write an event for this. What is it? On click. On click, which function? Handle fetch click. That is the function it should access. Now on fetch click, how you will fetch data from API? Generally, if you have learned JavaScript, in JavaScript, you can communicate with API. We can get the data from API by using JavaScript have a promise called JavaScript have a promise. It have a promise called JavaScript have a promise called fetch. Fetch is a JavaScript promise. Generally, people who come from JavaScript background, they can use this fetch. Suppose you belong to some jQuery, you know jQuery background also. You can use jQuery Ajax. You can use jQuery Ajax to communicate with APIs, right? So if you belong to React, React can use both of them. React don't have any inbuilt method for communicating with API. It uses jQuery methods or JavaScript. Internally, React is ready to use fetch. But if you want jQuery Ajax, then you have to install jQuery. You have to install jQuery, you have to import jQuery, and through jQuery Ajax, you can do that. I will show you through jQuery how we can do that. Not only that, if you are not satisfied, then what you can do is you can use a lot of third parties also. There are so many other third parties which allow you to communicate with APIs. Then depending on your requirements, features, you can use any third party APIs. I will show you all. I will show you without any third party how to handle. I will show you how to handle with different third parties, various third parties, how to set up and use. If you don't have any third party, React can still handle by using JavaScript fetch method, because JavaScript have a fetch. I think you learned, right? By using that fetch, you can communicate with APIs. So you see here, you see now what I'm doing. Now currently the result here, it is just showing a basic result here. Mars rover photos. You see that is Mars rover photos. Fetch button is ready. When I click the button, I should load this data, right? Then what we will do is in the button click, we use fetch method. You know how to use a fetch in JavaScript. Fetch method in JavaScript, it uses, actually fetch uses, if you have learned JavaScript, generally JavaScript fetch promise. Usually JavaScript fetch promise is written like this. We have fetch, you can fetch from particular URL and it will use then. So then then is going to get response, but that response will come in which form? Binary. That binary you have to convert into which form? JSON. After that, you will use another then, which will use the JSON data. Here we will use the JSON data. And if there is any problem in all this communication, it will have a catch, which is going to find out the issue in communication. What problem occurred? That is a general JavaScript promise actually. In JavaScript, you will learn how to use a fetch promise. It is a very common thing, right? JavaScript fetch form promise, we can use directly in React also. So what I am doing here, I am writing like this, fetch from which URL. I need to copy this URL from where data is coming. This is the URL. I will copy that URL and I will paste that URL. This is the data. That is the URL from where data is coming. Okay. Dot then. That means I'm using then function. Then uses a callback function. What this callback function can do? This callback function can get the response coming from this particular URL. That means it uses a response. I will just use an arrow technique. And what this response is done? This response should be converted into JSON. That means we will return this response into what we have to do. This response should be converted into JSON. Whatever response comes, that response should be converted into JSON. After that, then we have to collect the data. whatever data comes, whatever JSON, because fetch problem is it returns the data in binary form. That is the reason developers will use different techniques. That means every third party have a different feature. To according to their project, their requirements, if they think this third party is better, they will use it. Right? If they think that fetch is enough, they use fetch directly. They don't need any third party, right? Now, this data need to be stored. This is an object now. An object is coming. This must be stored inside the state. We will use set mars. Set mars. Into that, we need to send the data. Now, data is stored in that location. That means whatever data comes from this particular URL, this is now stored. This is now stored in which state object mars. That means now the mars is an object. That object contains all the data because this data is returning object. That means this URL is returning object. That object related data we are storing in this object. Mars is an object. Now what we will do, you saw that this is an object, am I right? Now all this result is stored in a state object. That state object name is what? Mars. Mars is equal to this data. Now, can you map on this data? No, directly. Why? Because in this Mars object, there is a property called photos. This photos is an array. We can do mapping on this. We can read all the elements from this array. So what you have to do now is, I will go here in the table body. We need to create a binding expression. What is the data source? Data source is Mars. Mars is an object. In that object, there is a property called photos. This photos is an array. On that array, we will use map. On that array, we are using map. That photos is an array. On that, we are using map. And what it will read? It is going to read every item. It is going to read every item. And what we need to do? For every item, we need to create a row. This row should have a key. Key is item.id. Actually, item.id is nothing but this photo ID. You must be very careful in accessing the data because capitalization, everything matters. How the property is defined, in the same way you have to access the property. We have to access the property. So, in the first cell, what you want to display? In the first cell, I want to display ID. Then here, I will put item dot what? ID. I am accessing the ID. That is the first cell it is using. So here, what we are doing, now lot of issues are there. You see, it is showing error. Why it is showing error? Because it is saying that cannot read properties of undefined reading photos. Why it is showing this point? Why it is showing this point? Because what is happening here? You written on fetch click. You written on fetch click. But you are using here in the body of table. In the body of table, what is happening is this is executed before the fetch is clicked. The body is executed before the fetch is clicked. Then what happens? Data is not there. When you click fetch, then the data is coming. This is the issue you have to face generally while writing anything in the React UI. Why? Because React UI will load immediately. The component loads immediately before any event fires. Problem understood? That means it is trying to render the data before the data is there. Because you written a table, table is trying to load before you click fetch. So generally what we do is we don't write like this. What we do is we write what activity to perform at the time of loading the component, because at the time of loading the component, it is expecting data. At the time of loading the component, we will send the data. Then we can add all other events, click button or some other button, anything you can do that. So never try any accessing of data and presenting of data directly without the data is ready first, right? First, we need to keep the data ready, and we want that data to be ready at the time of loading the page, loading the component. Actually, this loading of component, later you will learn about component stages, phases, life cycle you will learn. But loading of component is called as component mount. component mount is the first phase of every component. That means it will tell what activities to perform when component is loading. If you want to tell what activities to perform at the time of loading the component, you have to define component mount. Currently, which type of component we are creating? We are creating function component. We are creating function component. I told you we have class component also now. We have function component, we have class component also. In function component, this mounting is defined. In function component, this mounting is defined by using a hook called useEffect. By using a hook called useEffect. This hook is responsible for defining activities to perform when component mounts and component unmounts. Unmounts means component is destroyed. At the time of loading a component, if you want any activity to perform, that you have to write in a hook called what? useEffect. useEffect. So this is also not there earlier in React components. Now see, React have changed a lot from the old to new. So people who come from old React knowledge, it is completely different. So that means they have to leave their React knowledge, what they have learned aside, and now learn exactly how it is in the current. Why? Because if you start comparing the previous and now, your brain will explode, right? That is completely not suggestible also, right? Why? Because it is complete changed, lot of new things. So never compare with your old version knowledge and carry that forward, right? Learn this version of React as a new. Even you have experience on React. Why? Because here you will see several new things. Once you finish everything, then you will start comparing. You can easily compare, right? So in components, mount phase is written in function components by using which method? Effect, useEffect. So how to write this useEffect? I will show you. So don't do all this work. You have to do this. You have to do this, not on fetch click. You have to do this, not on fetch click. How to handle fetch click? I will tell you. What we will do this? We will do this on a separate event. Let's remove this. And let's remove this button also. I will put the button after this. Means I will show both techniques, how to handle. First, you will learn how to handle directly. So here you have to write a hook. What is that hook you have to write? We have to use useEffect. And you have to import that useEffect from React. From React, you have to import useEffect. useEffect is a hook. This hook uses a callback function. It uses a callback function. This uses a callback function. And very important is this callback function. This callback function can use all your fetch. Can use all your fetch. It can use all the fetch. You can write all this here. That means at the time of getting ready, your component is loading, data will come and data will store. Then after loading is finished, that data will be used here. Then no problem. That data will be used here. Then there is no issue. Then there is no issue. If you try to use it before it reads, then there is problem. Here useEffect has one more option here. How many times this useEffect is going to load? Every time when component loads, it will load. Every time component, that means it goes on repeating. I don't want it to repeat. I want it to repeat only when I want it, right? I don't want this to repeat again and again. Only one time it should render. Then actually useEffect method, after writing the callback function, it uses a dependency. It uses a dependency. This is dependency. Dependency indicates when it should load again. When it should load again. If you keep it empty, dependency, it will not load again. It will load only once. Actually, later we will use this dependency because suppose somebody changed some URL value. If somebody changed some URL value, somebody changed a selection, then it should load again. It is just like a constructor. You know, in a class, constructor will execute only once per an object. Only once per an object. You want the constructor to execute again. What you have to do? You have to create another object. Constructor will execute how many number of times? Only once. That means this is going to execute several times. We don't want to execute several times. Then we will put a dependency. This dependency you will learn later. Actually, empty dependency indicates this will load only once. Later, you can send dependency and tell when it should load again. Some value changed, it should load. Some click happened, it should load. You can tell the dependencies later. Without mentioning dependencies, don't ever write this mount phase. What it will do is, in the backend, it is going to mount again and again. We have to put the dependency to stop it. If you don't mention, it will be working in the background again and again. It will be huge burden to memory. That is the reason load once, stop. That is why dependency is required for this. Now I will save this here. You see in the UI here. Now, actually, this is all the data coming. Now you see again the same issue is there. What is the issue is there? Cannot read properties of undefined. Undefined. What does this undefined means? What does this undefined means? That means undefined means that there is no photos at all. There is no photos at all. Why there is no photos? There is already photos now. Because it is unable to understand the data type of this. What is the data type of Mars? Object type. So here in the state, I define an object type. I define it as an object type. That means we are configuring as an object type. That means when I define as an object type, you see here now. I will refresh here. You see it is again showing I can't use map. I cannot use map. That means why it cannot use map of that particular property. Again, the point here is you mentioned an object, but in that object, what properties are there? In that object, what properties are there? It doesn't know. Then I will write here, there is a property called what? Photos. This photos is what type? Array type. That photos is an array type. That means we are saying that photos is an array type. Now it is working fine. You have to tell exactly what type of data is coming. A developer cannot deal with the data if he cannot understand the data. First, you should understand the data, what data is coming. That means every API will not send the same data. Why I took this NASA API in the beginning itself? Because it is very complex data. Right? If you can handle any other data very easily. Right? That is the reason I took this as the first level. Because if you can understand this data, you can handle any API. Because this is too complex. More complex will be there. Later, we will see that. Initially, why this is important? Because when you are fetching the data, you should exactly tell what type of data you are dealing with. So I mentioned as an object. And remember, if this property name, some mistake in the spelling, capitalization, it is not mapping to the same API, it will not work. Because JSON is purely case sensitive. In data, how they mentioned, in the same way you have to use. Now you know how to present other details. How do we present other details? In the next cell, I want to present the photo. How do we present a photo? Then photo means here we need an IMG. In this image, we have to put width as 200 and height also as 200. And SRC is coming from item have .img underscore SRC. That is the property which is having image path. I'm using that img SRC. Now you can see it can display all those photos here. That means all the photos of that API it is displaying here. I want the camera name, I want the rover name. Then what I will do here in the next cell, I need to display the camera name. How to get the camera name? Item. In that there is an object called camera. In that object, it is an object actually. In that object, there is a property called full name, which will return the complete name of camera. You can see it will show the camera name here. So it is accessing and displaying the camera name. It is showing the camera name, front hazard avoidance camera, rear hazard avoidance camera. It is showing the camera name. I want the rover name. In the next cell. I am displaying in the next cell item dot rover dot name. It is actually returning the rover name. That means it is going to display the rover name and show the rover name. So you can see it is going to access all the data and display rover name. Curiosity, that is the rover name. And this is all the data that we have. Now what your interviewer will ask you, that means what your practical test will ask you that they will say that I want this to display in a grid style. That means I want per page only 10 results. You create a pagination. In the pagination, put next page, next page, next page like that. In every page, only 10 should come. Design. And put a filter above. What is the filter? Like user can select front camera. Photos should come taken by front camera only. Rear camera. Photos should come only rear camera. Curiosity. Photos taken by curiosity rover only. Right? That means you have to set filters. You have to set sorting. So many things. All these kind of things you need to achieve. Right? That type of functionalities we will see. But this is the basic thing. You are accessing the data and displaying. Originally, data looks like this. And developer made this. That means so that people can easily understand. And remember, presentation depends on your requirements. Presentation depends on your requirements. Suppose I want to make this clickable. That photo should be clickable. And when I click the photo, it should open in a separate tab full screen. How? How you will do that? How you will do that? So how you will do that? Nothing but you want to make this clickable, then you have to put this in an anchor. And on click, that photo should open. Then anchor href will use. Href will use item dot, what is it? Image src. You want to open in a new tab, then target we have to set is equal to underscore what? Blank. That's how we write. That means now what we are doing is we are making these photos, we are making these photos clickable. That means we are making these photos clickable. And when I click on that photo, it opens in a new tab. That means you are implementing the functionality of this. I open that photo here, it will open in a new tab. It opens in a new tab. This is the data we are displaying. This is how we are consuming the data from an API and presenting. Now, currently, I am doing this directly at the time of loading. No, I want to do when user clicks a button, show. I want to hide this normally. These all we will implement, right? We will learn. For that, we need to use events and other techniques to handle. So don't directly try to implement, right? You have to first know how to access and use at the time of loading the component. And what is the component loading related phase? Component loading related phase is defined by using what? It is defined by using useEffect. useEffect. Later you will learn about dependencies. Don't get stuck here because many people will keep on asking, sir, what is this dependency? You will learn, right? As of now, you just need to know that the useEffect is going to perform actions when component is mounted. And if you don't mention the dependency, this will do again and again, again and again. That means you see actually in the API here, inspect. You see in the inspect, let's open the console. Let's open the console here. In the console, it is now clean. I'm not using the dependency. I'm not using the dependency as of now. In the effect, useEffect, I am not using dependency. When I am not using the dependency, when you load the component, usually what happens is, this data it is going to reload that again and again. Reload that again and again. Later, I will put a log and show you how it will reload again and again the data. I will show. It repeats continuously. For that, we need to learn component lifecycle. Later, I will explain those lifecycle options. To avoid that repetition of loading again and again, what you have to do, you have to put a dependency. And currently, dependency is empty. Later, you can add the dependencies. That means what is the array means more than one. What is the point about dependency means you are telling when this should load again. When this should load again. Usually it loads first at the time of request. After that, it should load again when a certain action is performed. That you will send as dependency, then it will load again. This is what we will see. Later, we will understand detailedly about, because we will have a separate session on hooks concept. Life cycle hooks, it's a very big topic. Detailedly, we will learn everything there. But as of now, you should know how to handle a simple API and fetch the data and present. And here for fetching data from API, we are using JavaScript fetch. By using JavaScript, we are using that and accessing. I hope everybody understood this, right? You need to try this first. Once you try this, then in the next session, tomorrow, I will show you another API. and we will try to create some interactions also. Like